A major case that would have decided once and for all whether it is legal for an American citizen to be subjected to an experiment against their will was taken to the Supreme Court this week, where the Supreme Court denied it without even hearing the case. They threw away the case to die. This is the case titled Jennifer Bridges et al. Petitioners versus Houston Methodist Hospital. Jennifer Bridges is the nurse in 2021 who stood her ground with a bunch of other nurses at Houston Methodist Hospital and said, we're not going to take an experimental. By law, by federal law, these injections were experimental. According to the PrEP Act, which is a federal law, the vaccines were only approved under emergency use authorization. And under that law, the public must have the option of saying, no, I don't want to take this shot that's experimental. This act was implemented in order to protect healthcare providers, the nurse who's giving the injection, things like that, from liability if there's a bad side effect. This law was passed as a positive thing to allow people to be able to get a medicine that seems promising but isn't fully studied yet, and so people take it at their own risk. But the law specifically says that you cannot force them. First of all, you can't deceive them. There's got to be informed consent. So you got to give full disclosure that this is experimental. There's this many side effects, and we don't know for sure how your body's going to react. And then you can opt out if you want to. Now, that's the law. So Houston Methodist violated the law when they forced their nurses to take it. And they said, if you don't, you're going to experience these punishments. You're going to lose your job. And they were coordinating with the federal government on this, which is even worse, which is further against the law. So it seems that if Jennifer and the other nurses, there was 115 plaintiffs who took this case to the Supreme Court. It failed in the lower court. United States Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit actually was able to conceal a bunch of evidence, conceal the details about the PrEP Act in order to not allow Jennifer and the fellow nurses to win. But it seems that if this was taken to the Supreme Court, that they would be interested, that they would care about human beings being used as guinea pigs, and that the Supreme Court would take this case up and hear it. Instead, they denied it, didn't even want to hear it. And now Jennifer tells me the next step is that she's got 28 more days to ask them to reconsider. So right now she is trying to get Trump and RFK's attention about why this case is actually vitally important. We never want to go through something again where we're forced into situations like many Americans were to be experimented on pharmaceutically against their will, to experience life-changing repercussions if they didn't subject themselves to experiment. So it's an interesting thing happened. It was a week ago, last Thursday, that I was in Washington, D.C. I was invited to a dinner near the White House, the Maha Action Dinner, in which RFK Jr. happened to be at that dinner, and all of his top health officials, NIH, FDA, CDC, Callie Means was there. And Jennifer Bridges started texting me that night saying, do you know how to get a hold of RFK? I hear you're in DC. Well, RFK had already left the dinner. So I was like, I got to find one of his staffers. She told me about this case. I was like, this case is major. Let me flag down one of his staffers right now at this dinner and tell them to look at this case and like put a word in with the Solicitor General to get the Supreme Court to hear this case. Callie Means was walking out as I read her text. And I was like, hold on, he works for RFK now, right? So I run up the steps with him. He's like, who's this girl following me out into the darkness of night? And I'm like, can you take a look at this case and pass it on to RFK Jr. really quick? Well, he happened to be leaving with RFK's chief of staff. So I told the story to RFK's chief of staff, and he told me that this sounded like a case that RFK would be very interested in. He gave me his email, asked me to email the details to him, which I did. I followed up with him a few days later, just the other day, and he did not respond. Jennifer found out that the case was denied by the Supreme Court. So I don't know if the word was ever passed on to RFK Jr. about this case, but I guess she has one more shot to try to file again, ask them to reconsider. What else does the Supreme Court have going on right now? I'm going to dive deeper into the Supreme Court class so I can understand how the Supreme Court works. If you guys want to join me in class, it's a free class on how Supreme Court actually works from my friends at PragerU. They've got a nice online course about the Supreme Court called Supreme Court 101. We can all study it together and figure out why the heck the Supreme Court just denied this major case without even looking at it. Whether Americans can be subjected to experiments against their will, whether major institutions suffer any consequences for subjecting their employees to experimentation against their will. Because so far, Houston Methodist is just living its best life, no consequences. So how about it, Supreme Court? How about look at this case? Let me know your thoughts. Comment below.